The moon hung like a black pearl inside a storm of glowing clouds. Lightning ripped across the nebula, lighting the jagged ridges of the world below. No ship came here without reason. This was Kreth territory, the most feared predators. In the galaxy, their claws could tear apart armored suits. Their jaws could crush steel beams. Even the bravest mercenaries spoke of them in whispers. And here, on this hidden moon, they guarded something more precious than fleets or treasure, their young. 2 Kreth sentinels stood before the black stone gates of the nursery fortress, their bodies armored with natural bone plates, their yellow eyes glowing in the swirling fog. The air was heavy with the stench of minerals and strange alien pollen, making even drones malfunction. It was a place designed to keep intruders away and to kill them if they dared to come closer. From the mist, footsteps echoed, slow, unhurried. Not the sound of someone sneaking, but the sound of someone who believed they belonged here. Out of the haze emerged a figure, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing only a simple black jacket, no helmet, no weapon visible. A human. His boots crunched against the black volcanic gravel. His face was calm, almost unreadable, but his eyes held a strange sharpness, like someone who had seen too much war and lived through all of it. The sentinels tensed. The Kreth didn't talk before killing trespassers. To them, hesitation was weakness. One sentinel stepped forward, its shadow stretching across the human's chest like a hunting mark. And then it stopped. The predator's massive head lowered. Its eyes never left the human's face. The other sentinel, still rigid with confusion, followed suit. Both bowed their armored heads in a slow, deliberate motion, the sign of respect, given only to sworn guardians of their kind. High above the gates, hidden watchers stirred in disbelief. The surveillance feed streamed across the Predator Council chambers far from this moon. Dozens of alien leaders, ambassadors, and spies from across the galaxy saw the same thing, the deadliest species in known space bowing to a human. And they all asked the same question: why? The human didn't slow. He walked between the sentinels as though passing through old friends, his boots echoing in the stone hall beyond. He didn't look back. Behind him, the black gates closed, with a sound like a mountainside collapsing deep inside the fortress. Through narrow halls lined with carved bone and glowing resin lights, the human moved with purpose. Kreth warriors paused in their duties to watch him pass, their expressions unreadable behind their bone masks. A few inclined their heads. Others clenched their claws in what might have been silent approval. Not a single one challenged him. At the center of the fortress lay the nursery chamber, a massive circular space where warm mist swirled under a dome of crystal, filtering the nebula's strange light into shifting colors. Dozens of huge, smooth eggs rested in pools of mineral-rich water, guarded by warriors whose very presence could terrify armies. Around them, juvenile Kreth, not yet armored, padded across the warm stone floors under the watchful eyes of caretakers. The human Captain Elias Ward paused at the edge of the chamber. He stood still, breathing in the strange, heavy air, and for the first time, the mask of calm on his face shifted. Not fear, not awe. Something deeper, memory. He had been here before, but before the thought could settle, a deep vibration rolled. Through the stone floor, low alarm hum began to pulse across the walls. The warriors stiffened, their eyes narrowing. Somewhere above, gates clanged shut and heavy bulkheads sealed into place. From the far end of the chamber, the high matriarch of the Kreth emerged. Her body was a tower of muscle and bone armor, her mane of black quills glowing faintly in the colored light. She stopped before Elias, towering over him. Her voice was a deep, growling rumble, carrying the weight of authority and the edge of concern. "They come," she said simply. Ilias's eyes hardened. "How many?" Her jaw tightened. "Too many for even us to kill before they reach the young." Outside, the storm clouds above the moon rippled with unnatural light. The first enemy ships dropped from warp, sleek, black, and bristling with weapons. The Predator nursery moon was no secret anymore. Whoever they were, they hadn't come for trade. They hadn't come to threaten. They'd come to a race. Elias turned toward the gates, the same calm in his step as when he'd arrived, but now, with a different purpose. His voice was low, almost to himself, yet the matriarch heard every word. They'll wish they'd never come here. The invasion began. The storm outside had turned violent. Lightning raked across the black sky, illuminating the silhouettes of enemy ships as they descended through the upper atmosphere. Their formation was precise, predatory, not the messy scatter of pirates, but the disciplined spearhead of an organized fleet. The Kreth warriors on the walls gripped their weapons, their low growls blending with the thunder. Inside the fortress, the tension was sharp enough to cut. The High Matriarch moved with long, purposeful strides toward the war chamber, her clawed feet striking the stone like drum beats. Elias followed, his hands still empty, his gaze sweeping every shadow, every guard, every carved bone pillar. The corridors felt smaller now, as if the fortress itself was bracing for impact. The war chamber opened before them. It's a massive circular hall with a raised platform in its center. From the ceiling hung banners of dark leather, each marked with the blood seal of a past victory. Holographic projectors filled the air with images of the incoming fleet, their numbers growing with each scan. 20 ships, 40, 60, then more. Till the feeds struggled to render them all. The matriarch stopped before the council table, where 6 elder Kreth commanders waited. Their armor was jagged with the marks of old battles, their claws stained. With metal dust from torn enemy machines, they stared at Elias with a mixture of suspicion and something else wariness. He was the only human in the room, yet he stood as though he belonged here more than some of their own blood. They will. "Breach the gates within the hour," one commander snarled. "Even with every warrior ready, they will overrun the lower halls before we can move the young to safety." Another commander's quills rose in agitation. "We cannot fight both in the sky and on the ground. You must choose." The matriarch's gaze fell on Elias. "What do you choose, human?" The room went silent. No outsider was ever asked such a question. It was not their place to give orders here. But the matriarch's voice carried no mockery, only a grim understanding. She knew what he was, what he had once done. Elias stepped forward. "Shh, you hold the walls," he said, his tone calm, almost cold. "I'll take the ground." The commanders exchanged dark looks. One leaned forward, his bone armor creaking, one human against their landing force. "You think yourself a god?" Elias's eyes narrowed slightly. "No, but I've killed enough of them to make them believe I am." The matriarch's lips curled back in something close to a smile, a predator's smile. She reached behind her, thrown, and drew something from a black metal rack. It was a weapon, though no human forge had made it. Its body was carved from a single shard of volcanic glass, reinforced with etched bone and lined with a faintly glowing core. The edge shimmered like a heat mirage. She held it out to him, and take the first oath. The room grew even quieter. Every Kreth warrior in the chamber shifted to face him. The first oath was no small thing. It was the vow of the Outer Guardians, those who stood at the gates and let nothing pass alive. It was sworn only in the moments before the bloodstorm. Elias stepped closer, took the weapon in both hands, feeling its strange, balanced weight. The volcanic glass hummed faintly under his grip as if it recognized him. "I swear," said his voice steady, "no enemy will cross these halls while I breathe." The matriarch's claws tapped once against the stone table. Then breathe. Well, human. Moments later, the alarm horns blared across the fortress. The first enemy dropships broke through the clouds, streaking toward the surface like burning meteors. The walls shook with the impact of their landing. Elias didn't wait for orders. He walked out of the war chamber and into the growing roar of battle, the predator weapon in his hands. Behind him, the gates began to open just wide enough for one man to pass through. Outside, the world had turned to fire. The storm was now lit by the glare of descending ships, their metal hulls bleeding light across the jagged volcanic landscape. Enemy soldiers poured from the dropships, tall, insect-like creatures with segmented armor and curved rifles that hissed with plasma charge. They moved with terrifying precision, their ranks spreading in perfect arcs around the fortress gates. Elias stepped into their path. The invaders slowed. They had seen humans before, yes, but never one who stood so still, so unafraid, in the face of so many guns. Lightning split the sky again. And in that flash, Elias moved. The first shot came from the left, a streak of burning plasma slicing the rain and hissing as it tore into the blackened ground. Elias didn't dodge. He let it hit the stones at his feet, the molten spray burning the air. The enemy had expected fear. Instead, they saw a human step forward into the heat, weapon in hand. Eyes locked on the nearest soldier. The volcanic glass blade was not made for subtlety. When Elias moved, it sang a low, dangerous hum that carried even through the roar of the storm. His first strike wasn't a slash, it was a thrust, clean and brutal, driving straight through the plated chest of the nearest insect warrior. The armor cracked, the alien's limbs spasmed, then it fell without a sound, the weapon sliding free in a shower of glowing fluid. The ranks behind it hesitated. It was only for a breath, but that hesitation was everything. Elias was already inside their formation, cutting through the second before the first had even hit the ground. The blade seemed to burn through their armor as if it had been forged for this single purpose, to kill them alone. Plasma fire lit the air. Elias weaved between shots, his movements sharp and controlled, like a machine built for one task. He didn't waste energy. Every step, every strike, ended a life. He didn't shout. He didn't taunt. He killed in silence. From the fortress walls, the Kreth warriors watched, their growls deepening with each body that fell. They had seen many brave fighters before, but bravery was not what they saw here. This was precision. This was inevitability. One of the enemy commanders pushed forward, its crest plates rising high in challenge. It barked orders in a clicking, guttural language, rallying its troops into a tight arc around Elias. They would crush him by weight of numbers, drown him under a wall of plasma fire. It might have worked against anyone else. Elias dropped. Low, the blade cutting in a sweeping crescent that tore through 3 soldiers at once. He stepped into the gap before the rest could close it, driving the weapon upward through the commander's jaw. The alien's challenge died in a choking hiss as its body went limp. The rest broke. Not all. Some fought harder, spurred by desperation, but the crack had formed in their discipline. Insects that moved like machines now wavered, their perfect arcs breaking into scattered, uncoordinated bursts. Elias pressed harder, to every strike forcing them back toward the burning wrecks of their own dropships from above. The storm cracked again, lightning arcing across the ships, still descending. The smell of scorched metal and alien blood filled. The air, thick and bitter. Elias stood among the bodies, his chest rising slowly, the rain running red down the blade in his hands. The surviving enemy soldiers regrouped farther out, their lines reforming under the cover of their larger war machines. A voice roared from the walls, the matriarchs. Carrying across the battlefield, the first oath stands. No enemy crosses. The gates. Elias didn't turn to look. His eyes were already on the next wave coming through the smoke. The first kill was done. The real battle was only beginning. The ground shook before the enemy even came into view. It was not the rhythmic march of infantry this time, but a deep, steady tremor, the kind that rattled the stones of the fortress and made dust fall from the old gates. Elias knew what it meant before the first shadow appeared through the smoke. Siege breakers. The creatures that pulled them were monsters in their own right, 12-legged. Thick-skinned brutes bred for one thing, hauling war machines across any terrain. Strapped to their armored backs were the enemy's heavy guns, the kind that could tear through fortress walls in minutes. Plasma cannons, missile pods, and something new, long black barrels that hummed with energy. A sound that made the air feel heavy. The Kreth warriors above the gates hissed in unison. Even they had no easy answer for these machines. Could rain fire from above, yes, but these beasts had hides like stone, and the gunners riding them were armor that could take a direct hit. The enemy knew this. That's why they sent them now, not to breach the gates with soldiers, but to erase them entirely. Elias stepped forward, the reins still running off his shoulders. his blade heavy in his grip. He had faced infantry. Yes, he'd cut them down without mercy. But this was different. The siege breakers were built for endurance. Killing them would be slow. Too slow. And in the time it would take, the fortress could be reduced to rubble. The first blast came, a blinding column of white, plasma striking the gates. The impact sent a shockwave through the fortress, knocking several creaths from the walls. The gates held for now, but the stone had blackened and cracked where the shot had landed. Second blast followed. The enemy was testing the wall. Feeling for its breaking point, Elias moved before the third. He sprinted into the open killing field between fortress and siege line, weaving between the wreckage of the earlier battle. Enemy fire followed him instantly, streaks of light ripping through the rain and striking the ground in angry bursts. One of the siege beasts turned its massive head toward him, the gunners shouting to each other in their sharp alien tongue. A missile pod rotated, locking onto him. Elias didn't slow. At the last moment, he dove behind the shattered hull of a dropship as the missiles struck, the explosion ripping metal apart and showering him with burning fragments. He rose from the smoke, blade in hand, and charged. The nearest siege beast loomed above him, its armored legs stomping craters into the earth. Elias didn't attack the armor. He went for the handlers. A single leap, a thrust upward, and his blade punched through the belly of the first gunner. Before the alien could even scream, Elias dragged the weapon free and took the second. The fires burned low, but the battlefield was still lit by the smoldering wrecks of enemy machines. The fortress gates stood firm, their black stones smeared with alien blood. For a time there was silence, the kind that pressed against the ears and made every breath sound too loud. The defenders thought the enemy might be retreating. Elias knew better. He stood on the wall, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the killing field. The air smelled wrong, with the sharp metallic tang of battle. This was different. It was the heavy, damp smell of something moving through the night, something large, careful, and hunting. The rain had stopped, but the clouds hung low, pressing. Shadows into the ground. Movement, he said softly, his voice carrying only to the nearest Creth warrior. The alien followed his gaze, but at first it saw nothing. Then, from the tree line, a faint shimmer moved, not like a ship's shield, but like the skin of a predator that did not wish to be seen. The matriarch's command cut through the stillness. Archers ready. But Elias shook his head. They want you to fire first. Don't give them your position. Let them come close. The shapes came in silence. 6. No. 8 of them. Low to the ground, moving with liquid grace. Elias could feel the weight in their footfalls through the stones of the wall. These were not infantry. These were hunters-killers trained for one thing, slipping past defenses to butcher the young. When the first leaped, its shimmer broke, revealing a nightmare of claws and curved teeth. It should have landed on the wall in the midst of the defenders. Instead, it met Elias midair, the black blade cutting deep into its chest before its talons ever touched stone. It fell backward with a shriek, its camouflage bleeding away as its body hit the ground. That broke the quiet. The others came fast, vaulting the wreckage, climbing the wall like spiders. The Creth warriors roared and swung their heavy axes. But the hunters were fast, too fast. One landed among the defenders, cutting down 2 before a spear took it through the throat. Another nearly made it past, slipping toward the inner gate. Elias was there first. He didn't swing wildly. Every strike was aimed to kill. A severed spine here, a crushed windpipe there. Blood sprayed across the stones, black under the firelight. The hunters realized too late that the man they thought was just another wall guard was their greatest threat. They turned on him as one. Fight was a blur, claws against steel, roars against silence. Elias took a slash to the side, the claws tearing through armor and skin, but he didn't slow. Pain was just a sound in the distance. He cut down one hunter, then used its falling body as cover from the next. When it ended, the wall was slick, with blood, and the bodies of the hunters lay where they had fallen. The defenders breathed hard, their armor dented, and their weapons chipped. Elias leaned against the parapet, the wound in his side bleeding freely. The matriarch climbed the wall to stand beside him. "They sent their finest tonight," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned, and they failed. Elias looked past the corpses, into the shadows beyond. "They'll send worse," he said quietly. "They always do, somewhere." In the darkness, a distant roar answered him. The enemy did not attack at dawn. The Kreth expected them with the first light, but the morning passed in uneasy silence. Even the birds in the trees beyond the battlefield were gone, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Elias stood by the inner gate, his side bandaged, his armor patched, his sword freshly cleaned. The matriarch's children had been moved deeper underground. He did not like that. It meant the enemy had time to think. By noon, the sky began to darken, not with clouds, but with something vast moving overhead. The defenders looked up and froze. It was a ship. No, not a ship. It was alive. Skin rippled like muscle, and its many wings shifted with slow, predatory grace. It cast a shadow over the fortress so deep it felt like night. The matriarch's voice was a whisper, a sky-daverer. Elias had heard stories of them beasts, bred for only one purpose, to breach strongholds and consume everything inside. Armies had fallen to a single one. Cities had vanished beneath their wings. No one had ever killed one in open battle. The creature circled once, then let out a scream that made the stones tremble. It began its descent. Massive talons, each the size of a spear, reached for the wall. The Kreth charged to meet it, their war cries rising like a tide. Arrows flew, bouncing harmlessly off its armored hide. Firebombs burst against its scales, but the beast only roared louder. Elias did not run to the wall. Instead, he climbed to the highest tower, ignoring the pain in his ribs. From here, he could see the creature's head, its eyes black and endless. He remembered what the matriarch had told him when he first arrived. "We do not need someone who can fight alongside us. We need someone who can do what we cannot." As the Sky Devourer slammed into the wall, Elias leaped from the tower. He fell, past its snapping jaws, driving his blade deep into the joint of its neck. The force nearly tore his arms from their sockets, but he held on. The beast thrashed, its wings beating the air into a hurricane. Elias climbed, each movement a battle against the wind and the pain. He reached the top of its skull. The armored plates here were thick, but between them was a narrow seam. He drew the short blade from his belt, the one made for human hands, not Kreth claws, and plunged it deep. The Sky Devourer screamed again, a sound that split the air and made the fortress gates shake. Its wings faltered. It fell. The impact threw Elias clear. He hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. When he looked up, the beast was still. Its massive form sprawled across the battlefield. The defenders stared in stunned silence. Then, slowly, the roar began, Kreth voices raised in victory. The matriarch came to stand over him. "When we chose a human to guard our young, the galaxy laughed at us," she said. "They said your kind was too small, too fragile. Now they will tell new stories." Elias pushed himself to his feet, blood still seeping through his bandages. "Let them talk," he said. "As long as the gates hold, the young are safe. That's all that matters." The matriarch placed one clawed hand over his chest in the Kreth gesture of oath. "Then hear this, human. From this day forward, the gates are yours to guard. Not because we chose you, but because you have earned them." Beyond the walls, the enemy army was still out there watching. But for the first time, they did not advance. The deadliest species in the galaxy had given their trust to a human, and now the galaxy understood why.